As the world falls quiet and the stars begin their slow dance above, let us drift back, far, far back, to a time before memory, when fire was new and the whisper of wind through the grass was the only song. Welcome to the Chalcolithic Age, a time of soft footsteps on earth, of copper glinting under sun and moon, of humans learning, building, dreaming. Close your eyes and let the echoes of this ancient world carry you gently into rest.
Beneath the soft rustle of wind-blown grasses and beneath the tender glow of a sleepy sun rising over a wild and quiet valley, a young man named Elin stepped out of his shelter of reeds and clay. The year was unknown, the sky endless, and the land around him was still mostly untouched by man. This was the dawn of the Chalcolithic Age, the age when copper first whispered its secrets to humankind. Elin was part of a small community, no more than 20 souls, who had made their home near a slow-moving river. Their lives were simple, guided by the patterns of nature. The sun told them when to rise, and the moon when to rest. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke filled the air, and the songs of birds danced in the treetops. That morning, as dew clung to the long grass, Elin set out to check the traps his people had woven from vine and willow. They needed food, but also time. Time to carve tools from stone, to tend the small patch of barley they had started growing, and to melt the soft reddish stones they had found in the hills. They didn't yet know the full power of copper, but they felt its promise, the strange way it shone in the firelight, how it softened in the flame, then hardened again. They called it the sleeping sun. As Elin knelt by the river and watched a heron pass by in silence, he smiled. Life was quiet, uncertain, but full of possibility. Nature was not his enemy, it was his teacher. And slowly, gently, humanity was awakening to a new era.
Far beyond the river where Alon lived, nestled between rounded hills and thick groves of oak, the earth held a quiet secret, veins of copper lying deep beneath layers of stone and soil. These veins were like roots of an ancient dream, waiting for someone to notice. Elon's elders often spoke of fire not just as warmth or light, but as a spirit, a force that changed things. It cooked their food, hardened their pottery, and now it had begun to change the way they lived. One night, while throwing stones into the fire for fun, a boy named Ron noticed something strange. A stone began to melt, forming small orange droplets that gleamed like the morning sun. He called for Alon. Together they crouched by the coals, watching. The stone sizzled and wept copper, soft, glowing, and warm to the touch. It felt like a gift. The elders gathered, puzzled, then fascinated. They didn't understand how or why, but they began collecting more of these special stones from the hills. The people built hotter fires using dry wood and animal fat, carefully shaping the flames with stone rings. The copper, once free, could be hammered into simple tools, soft but useful, elegant in their glow. These weren't yet weapons, they were symbols, symbols of a changing world. Alon spent his days listening to the fire, feeling the rhythm of creation. At night, under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, he dreamed of copper birds and burning rivers. The Chalcolithic world was still quiet, still bound to the land. But deep beneath their feet, something old was waking, and it would never sleep again.
Morning came gently. Mist floated above the river like wandering spirits, soft and slow, as Elin dipped his hands into the cold water. He felt its movement, constant, patient, never stopping. The river did not speak, yet it taught. For generations, his people had followed the river's guidance. It told them where to build, where to plant, and where the deer would come to drink. Its banks provided soft clay for pots, smooth stones for tools, and reeds for baskets and roofs. But now, in this new age of copper, they looked at the water differently. Elan's sister, Mira, was learning to shape clay into jars. She discovered that when lined with crushed copper and heated carefully, the vessels became stronger. They didn't crack as easily in the cold, and they gleamed faintly, as if kissed by sunlight. It was a small magic, not from gods, but from patience. By the river the children played, their laughter echoing between the trees. They chased frogs, built tiny dams, and watched ants carry leaves twice their size. Life was gentle here. No walls, no armies, just people and the land. Elan, while walking alone one dusk, found an old tree root shaped like a spiral. He kept it, not for use, but for wonder. It reminded him that not all things must be useful. Some things were simply beautiful. He buried it near the riverbank, whispering thanks. The Chalcolithic man did not rush. He observed, adapted, and moved with the earth's rhythm. There were no roads, no cities, but there was peace. And in that peace, humankind was learning, not just to survive, but to belong. Evening light spilled across the hills like honey. The sky, painted in soft lavender and fading gold, watched over the small village as fires were lit and quiet songs rose with the smoke. Ellen sat with the elders near the largest hearth, listening to tales older than copper. Stories of animals that once spoke and stars that used to walk the earth. But tonight, the talk was different. Ron, the curious boy who had first melted copper in the fire, had begun shaping it into something new. Not tools, but symbols. He held up a thin copper disc, hammered flat with care and etched with spirals and lines. "I think this speaks," he whispered. The others nodded, though they didn't yet know what it said. This was something new, not just survival, but meaning. Meanwhile, Mira had been experimenting with mixing crushed stones into her clay. Some mixtures made the pots crack. Others made them sing, humming softly when tapped. She called them sky pots, believing the sound helped carry prayers upward. And still, the people hunted, gathered, and planted. They watched the stars tracking their return each season. The moon marked the time to harvest, the sun the time to rest. These rhythms were not forced upon them, they were part of them. Ellen often stood on the rocky hill above the village, arms open wide, feeling the wind wrap around him like a cloak. In the silence he heard the song of stone and sky, a music that needed no words. It was the sound of becoming, of a people slowly waking to the idea that they were shaping their world, not just walking through it. And in that quiet, sleep would come easy. At dawn, a soft fog hugged the trees. The forest beyond the village stretched endlessly, its tall trunks like silent watchers of time. Elan stepped carefully between moss-covered roots, the earth cool beneath his feet. He was not alone, not truly. The forest breathed. It whispered. This was the place where his people found what they needed most: wood for fires, fruits in season, and animals for meat and hide. But it was more than a storehouse. It was sacred. The Chalcolithic people had no temples. Their worship was in quiet gestures: a stone left by a tree, a bowl of grain placed near a den. Elan often brought copper shavings into the woods, scattering them by old stumps. He believed the trees understood. Today, he searched for a rare wood called sleeping pine, known for its soft glow in firelight and its sweet scent when burned. His father once said it kept bad dreams away. He found it growing near a stream, guarded by brambles and silence. Carefully, he cut only what was needed, never more. Waste was unheard of. Each piece had purpose, every branch a future tool, every leaf a teaching. Nearby, Mira gathered herbs for dye. She had learned to stain her pots with deep reds and calming blues, using roots and crushed petals. Her work was not just useful, it was beautiful. And beauty in this world was a kind of wisdom. When they returned, the forest behind them seemed to sigh, not in sorrow, but in knowing. The people had come and gone and left no harm. That night, Elon placed a piece of sleeping pine in the fire. Its scent drifted gently through the village. One by one, they fell asleep, their dreams carrying them deep into the forest's heart, where even the trees remembered them.
The winds shifted, and with them came a faint sound, a rumble beneath the ground, like the voice of the world turning in its sleep. Ellen paused while shaping a stone tool, his hands still, listening. It wasn't thunder, and it wasn't danger. It was something older. That afternoon, the elders told of places where the earth itself cracked open, revealing veins of bright red and orange, not blood, but metal. In these places, they said, the land whispered if you were quiet enough. So Ellen and Ron followed the sounds, venturing beyond the familiar hills. They found it near a dried stream bed, jagged stone layered with greenish ore, copper. Ellen ran his fingers across it, cold, rough, heavy with promise. They marked the place with a woven ribbon and gathered a few pieces to carry home. The journey back was slow. The land around them was not dangerous, but unfamiliar. Strange birds called from the trees. Once they saw the print of a large animal in the mud, a warning, but not a threat. The world, they knew, was full of others living their own quiet lives. That night, under the stars, Ron placed a new stone into the fire. As it melted, Mira sang, not loudly, but softly, a tune she remembered from her grandmother. The village listened. There were no drums, no instruments, only voice and flame. And the earth listened, too. In the Chalcolithic world, even silence was filled with meaning. The people didn't need words for everything. Some things were simply felt. The warmth of fire, the weight of stone, the breath of wind and tall grass. Sleep came like a blanket, wrapped in copper light and the soft beating of the earth's heart.
Rain fell gently, like the rhythm of a calm drum. The village shimmered under the morning mist, and smoke rose lazily from the hearths. Elon stood beneath a canopy of woven reeds, watching droplets race down the leaves. Beside him, Ron studied the frame of a small structure they were building, something new. Until now, their homes had been made of mud, sticks, and thatch. They bent with the wind and dissolved with the rain. But now, with copper tools, the people could cut wood more cleanly, shape stone more precisely, and dream a little bigger. Together, they had decided to build a stronger shelter, a place for storing firewood and tools, and perhaps for rest during storms. It wouldn't be grand, but it would be lasting. They used copper blades to split branches, and copper owls to punch holes in leather bindings. The metal didn't crack like stone, nor splinter like bone. It was soft, yes, but it listened to the hand that held it. And for the first time, the people began to trust in what they could build. Mira decorated the door with tiny sun patterns, carved into the wood with a sharpened copper pin. She said it would keep the dark away. As the shelter rose, so did something else. Pride. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest like a warm stone. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, They were shaping more than clay and wood. They were shaping a life. That night, as the rain continued to fall, Ilan sat inside the new shelter, dry and calm. He listened to the wind outside and to the crackle of the fire, and slowly, gently, the world faded into sleep, one copper dream at a time.
The first light of day slipped through the trees like gold dust. Ilan moved slowly, following faint tracks pressed into the soft soil, twin crescents left behind by a deer's delicate hooves. Hunting was not for sport, it was for balance, for life, and it was done with respect. In the Chalcolithic world, animals were not enemies. They were companions on the earth, living parallel lives. The people only took what was needed, and always with care. Before every hunt, they offered thanks to the land, and after, they used every part of what they took: bone, hide, sinew, and meat. Nothing was wasted. Ilan held a small copper-tipped spear, its point carefully hammered by Ron and sharpened with care. It was lighter than stone, easier to carry through the forest, and more precise. Not perfect, but it was enough. He crouched near a clearing where deer often grazed at dawn. The breeze shifted gently, carrying the scent of damp leaves and wildflowers. Birds called softly in the distance, their voices delicate like strings in the air. Then, movement. A doe stepped into the open, her head lowered to the grass. Ilan watched, unmoving. He didn't throw, not today. He simply observed. In that moment, he understood something deeper, that survival wasn't always about taking. Sometimes it was about learning. He returned to the village with empty hands but a quiet heart. Mira smiled when she saw him. "You found something?" she asked. He nodded. A path. That evening he carved the shape of the doe into a piece of driftwood and hung it near the fire. It wasn't a trophy, it was a reminder. Sleep came that night like falling leaves, slow, silent, and soft.
As the sun climbed, warm and steady, Mira knelt by the riverbank where the clay was richest, smooth, cool, and dark as sleep. With gentle hands, she scooped it into her basket, humming softly. This clay had memory, she believed. It remembered hands, fire, and shape. Back in the village, she worked in a shaded circle, her fingers shaping bowls and jars. Each piece spun slowly under her touch, as if it were alive. Mira didn't just make containers, she told stories in form. Swirls for rivers, dots for rain, waves for the wind. Her brother Ellen watched as she pressed a copper pin into the side of a jar, leaving small sunbursts around the rim. For warmth, she explained, so the food inside will always feel the sun. The Chalcolithic people had no written words, but their hands spoke fluently. Pottery was their language, each line a sentence, each mark a memory. When the pots were ready, they were placed in open fires. The flames licked around them, hardening the clay, sealing the stories. Some cracked, others sang. Later they stored seeds inside, barley, wheat, and lentils, guarded against the damp. These seeds were their future. A season of hunger could come at any time, but these vessels, born of earth and fire, stood as quiet guardians. That night, Mira placed one of her finest jars beside the hearth. Inside it, she placed a single copper bead, a feather, and a dried leaf.
"A dream jar," she said softly, "for safe sleep." And so, under the quiet breath of stars, the people rested, wrapped in the warmth of firelight and the silent stories of clay.
The wind that day carried a different scent, dry grass, distant smoke, and something unfamiliar. Elon stood on the hilltop, eyes squinting into the horizon. In the distance, a faint trail of dust curved across the valley like a thread unwinding. Travelers. It was rare, but not unknown. Other tribes lived beyond the hills, some near great lakes, others in dry plains. Most they had never seen, but now and then strangers would appear, bringing with them tales, trinkets, and questions. The village stirred with quiet wonder. Mira placed her best pots near the path, not as offerings, but as a welcome. Ron polished a copper pendant, hoping to trade it for something unknown, perhaps shells from far rivers or stone from the south that sparked brightly when struck. When the travelers arrived, they came without threat. Men, women, and children with faces browned by sun and stories in their eyes. They carried woven bags, feathers, and objects unfamiliar to Elon's people, obsidian blades, dyed cloth, and seeds they had never seen. No one shouted. There was no noise, just quiet greetings in broken gestures and careful smiles. They exchanged food, tools, and ideas. One woman showed Mira how to braid grass into rope strong enough to carry logs. Ron watched a man start fire with nothing but wood and breath. That night, they sat together around a great fire. No one spoke the same language, but music found its way. One of the travelers hummed a song, slow and deep. Mira followed with a flute made of reed. The children clapped stones in rhythm, and under the rising moon, something old and beautiful stirred. Connection. In the chalcolithic night, with wind in the trees and strangers by the fire, sleep came like a shared breath, gentle, warm, and full of dreams yet to be told.
In the heart of the village, the fire never truly died. Even when the wind howled or rain soaked the ground, someone always watched over the coals. The fire was not just warmth, it was memory. It held the stories of every meal, every tool, every silent night. Elon had taken his turn tending it many times, but tonight felt different. The air was still. The moon, a thin silver blade, watched from above. He sat beside the glowing embers, feeding them with small twigs of sleeping pine, listening to the gentle crackle that echoed like old voices. Beside him lay a stone mold, a simple shape, half-finished, used for pouring melted copper into blades or hooks. It had taken weeks to carve, slowly, with patience and care. Not every village had one. It was a gift from the travelers, traded for Mira's pottery and Ron's copper disc. Tonight, Elon would try something new. He placed small pieces of green ore into a clay bowl and slid it deep into the heart of the fire. The flames rose slowly, then roared, fed with dry grass and animal fat. He worked quietly, eyes focused, as the ores softened, then bled, glowing orange like a tiny sun being born. With careful hands, he poured the molten copper into the mold. It hissed, shimmered, then settled. And then, silence. He let it cool as the stars wheeled above him. No one else was awake, only the fire and the night. He thought of his ancestors and those yet to come, all bound by flame. When sleep finally came, Elon curled beside the hearth, warm and dreaming. And deep inside the mold, the future cooled, still glowing.
At the edge of the village, where the wild grass danced with the morning breeze,
Mira knelt with her hands deep in the soil. Around her lay a handful of seeds, some round, some long, some gifted by the travelers. They came from lands unknown, and Mira didn't yet know what they would become, but she trusted the earth. The Chalcolithic people were still new to farming. For most of their lives, they had followed the rhythm of nature, gathering what grew, moving when the land grew tired. But now, with stone sickles edged in copper and clay pots to store grain, they had begun to stay, to plant, to hope. Mira pressed each seed gently into the ground, covering it like a secret. She whispered to them, not words, but sounds of kindness. She believed the seeds could feel them. Perhaps they could. Ilan joined her, holding a wooden frame wrapped with sinew, a simple tool to draw straight lines in the soil. They worked side by side, not rushing, not speaking. The sun rose slowly, warming their backs, casting long shadows across the new field. Nearby, Ron placed small copper chimes in the trees. When the wind blew, they sang. He said they would scare away birds. Mira thought they were beautiful, even if they didn't work. By evening, the field was quiet again, just dark rows of earth, dotted with hope. They didn't know if the rains would come or if the seeds would grow, but they had planted something, not just food, but the idea of future. That night, Mira dreamed of golden fields swaying under a calm sky. In her sleep, she smiled, knowing that even if forgotten, the field would remember.
Far beyond the river, past the forest's edge and the golden fields, a great mountain rose, dark, unmoving, older than memory. The villagers called it the Sleeper, for clouds often gathered around its peak like a blanket, and thunder echoed from it as if from a deep, slow breath. Ilan had only seen it from a distance, but one morning, driven by a quiet pull, he decided to walk toward it. The journey took him through untouched land, places where trees grew thick and tall, where no trails marked the earth, and birds scattered at his steps. He carried little: dried meat, a water skin, and a small copper pendant shaped like a sun, given by Mira for protection. As he walked, the mountain grew, not just in size but in presence. It loomed without threat, but also without welcome. Its silence was full. Near its base, Ilan found stones unlike any he had seen, heavy, veined, cold even in sunlight. He cracked one open with his copper blade. Inside, flecks of metal. Not copper, but something darker, harder. He didn't know its name, only that the mountain had kept it hidden. He marked the place with a circle of branches, then sat on a flat rock and looked out over the land. From here, he could see the river winding like a ribbon, the thin smoke from his village rising in the distance, the patch of new fields, and the forest beyond. And for the first time, he felt something large, that his people were part of something vast, unfolding slowly like the shadow of this ancient mountain. When he returned home, he said nothing, but that night he slept deeper than ever before, held by the silence of stone and the dream of what still waited beneath it. It was a dry morning. The sky above the village shimmered pale and cloudless, and the wind carried the scent of dust and sun-warmed stone. The river had thinned, not dangerously, but enough to stir concern. The people gathered, quiet, eyes turned toward the hills. Water was life. It cooled the fire, fed the fields, shaped the clay. Without it, even copper could do nothing. Ilan remembered something, a story once told by an elder, of water that slept beneath the ground, not in rivers or streams, but hidden, waiting. With Ron and Mira, he set out to find it. They followed the cracks in the earth, the way dry grass bent, the songs of thirsty birds. Days passed slowly, their path marked by silence. Then, near a low hollow surrounded by willow trees, they found it.
a soft patch of earth darker than the rest. When Elon pressed his hand down, it came back damp. With wooden shovels and copper blades they dug. Slowly, carefully, whispering thanks with every layer. The ground gave way to wet sand, then to a shallow pool of cool water, shining like silver under the sun. They had found a spring. They covered it with stones and reeds to protect it, then carried water back to the village in Mira's largest jars. The people didn't cheer. They simply nodded, grateful, placing small offerings near the new source, feathers, herbs, and bits of copper. That night, the village was quieter than usual. There was no singing, no clapping stones, only a calm, restful stillness. And as Elon lay beside the hearth, he thought of the water still flowing in darkness, beneath roots and soil, unseen, but always present, like sleep itself.
The seasons were beginning to shift. The sun lingered a little longer each evening, casting golden light across the hills. Shadows stretched farther, and the air smelled of change, dry grass, ripened fruit, and something Ellen couldn't name. Time, perhaps. Mira watched the stars at night now, more often than before. She had noticed patterns in their movement, how one bright star always returned to the same place just before the rains. She began marking them with dots on flat stones, using copper dust and plant dye. Each dot, a memory, each line, a question. The village, though small, was becoming wiser. Ron had made a tall wooden post in the center of the camp. He noticed that its shadow shifted slowly through the day, stretching long at dawn and dusk, standing still at noon. He tied bits of cloth to it, tiny markers of time. Without knowing the word, they had made a sundial. The people began to gather around it each morning, using its shadow to plan when to cook, when to gather herbs, when to rest. Not because they had to, but because they could. Ellen, watching this, felt something stir deep in him, a feeling that they were not just living day to day anymore. They were looking forward, learning not just from nature, but with it. That night, he and Mira sat beneath the stars, wrapped in fur and silence. A shooting light crossed the sky. She gasped, but made no wish. She only smiled and whispered, "It's time." Time for planting. Time for change. Time for sleep. And so, under the quiet spinning sky, the village drifted off, held gently in the arms of a world that always turned and always returned.
The baby came just after the first summer storm. Rain had fallen gently through the night, washing the leaves and soaking the clay paths, leaving the village quiet and fresh. At sunrise, a small cry broke the stillness, new, soft, and full of life. A child had been born to Aylin's cousin under the roof of their new copper-framed shelter. They named her Nara, which meant light after rain. The villagers gathered in silence to see her. Mira brought a tiny charm made of sun-dried clay and crushed flower petals. Ron offered a copper ring, not for the child to wear, but to place beside her as she slept, a promise of protection, of strength. Nara's mother, tired but smiling, wrapped her in a cloth woven from reeds and soft fur. Aylin looked at the child's tiny fingers, so small yet curled tightly, as if already holding the future. In the Chalcolithic world, each new life was more than a gift. It was a thread, a link between past and future. With no books, no written stories, knowledge passed through hands and hearts.
from old eyes to young ones, from stone to copper. As the rain clouds drifted away and sun warmed the earth again, the people lit a small fire, not for cooking but for blessing. They placed tokens beside it, seeds, feathers, bits of bone, and drops of melted copper. Each item a symbol of something she might need: nourishment, flight, memory, and strength. That night the village fell asleep with softer hearts. Nara's breath mingled with the wind, and her tiny dreams slipped into the air like floating seeds. And the earth listened as always.
The sky had darkened with quiet promise. Gray clouds rolled in like slow-moving beasts, heavy with rain not yet fallen. In the heart of the village, the people gathered near the central fire, their faces turned to the sky in reverence and hope. It had been many suns since the last rain, and the soil had grown dry and tired. An elder stepped forward, thin, robed in a mantle of woven grass and feathers, his face lined with years. They called him the Rain Caller, not for magic, but for memory, for he remembered the signs, the rhythms of earth and sky. He raised his arms slowly, not to command the clouds, but to speak to them in gesture and gratitude. Around him others followed, humming low tones that resonated with the ground. No one believed they summoned the storm, but still the ritual soothed their spirits, linked them to something greater. As twilight deepened, the wind shifted. A single drop fell, dark and round, into the dust. Then another, then a hush, a moment so soft it seemed the world paused, and the rain came. Gentle, warm, forgiving. It tapped the rooftops of clay and straw. It danced on copper bowls left out like offerings. Children laughed, old eyes closed in peace. The fire hissed, but held. That night, under the sound of falling rain, the village slept deeper than it had in many moons. Dreams were full of rivers, of green things growing, of balance restored. And the Rain Caller, wrapped in his cloak of feathers, sat by the embers and listened to the water, like an old friend come home.
It was Mira who found the cave. She had wandered farther than usual, following a trail of wild berries and bird calls, until the trees opened into a rocky slope. There, behind a curtain of ivy and silence, a dark entrance waited, cool, still, and breathing faint air like the mouth of the earth. She stepped inside slowly, her feet soft on the stone, her breath held like a secret. At first, it was darkness. Then, color. The cave walls were alive with shapes and stories. Painted in ochre, charcoal, and crushed herbs, they showed deer leaping across hills, spiral suns, rivers that danced like snakes. Handprints, too, left in faded red, some large, some no bigger than a child's. The echoes of lives long gone, but never truly lost. When she returned to the village, Mira spoke not with words, but with eyes wide and glowing. Elon and Ron followed her back, carrying torches made from pine pitch and wrapped reeds. Together, they stood in the painted chamber, quiet as the stone itself. "These are the ones before us," Ron whispered. "Their dreams are still here." Inspired, the villagers began to create their own symbols. Mira mixed dyes from berries and bark. Elon etched gentle lines into flat stones. Children pressed their palms into clay, laughing. It wasn't about art, it was about memory, holding time in color and shape. A new cave wall was chosen, near the sleeping shelter. Not hidden, but known. The people called it the wall that remembers. That night, Mira lay beside her fire, fingers stained with color, heart full. She dreamed of hands reaching across time, from deep past to soft future, all painting, all remembering. And the cave, silent and still, held those dreams like sacred breath.
Long before the first copper blade touched the earth, the stars had already been watching. Now, in the time of Ilan and Mira, the people began watching back. It was Ryan who first noticed the pattern, the way the sun rose just a little farther to the left each morning, then returned again, like a slow breath stretched across seasons. He carved lines into a flat stone, marking the sun's path with quiet wonder. Soon others joined him. At night they lay on cool grass, eyes turned upward, wrapped in wool and silence. They named the stars not with words, but with stories. The three deer, the river tail, the woman who waits. Their shapes danced slowly across the sky, faithful and unchanged. By the eastern field, the villagers placed stones upright in the earth, each one marking the place where the sun rose on the longest and shortest days. They called it the Circle of Light. At dawn, they gathered there, not to worship, but to witness. It reminds us, Mira would say, that everything moves, but nothing is lost. Children made star maps with charcoal on bark. Elders spoke of the moon and how its face changed, soft as breath. The people began planting by its rhythm, sowing when it waxed, harvesting as it waned. The sky became not just a ceiling, but a teacher, a calendar, a companion. That evening, as the stars blinked into place like old friends, Ilan lay beside the fire, the warmth on his skin and the sky in his eyes. The earth below, the heavens above, and in between the quiet breath of those who watched and waited. Sleep came gently, wrapped in starlight. It began with a feather. A long, pale one, found by Mira near the riverbank, unlike any she had seen before. Its shimmer held the light of morning and the hush of dusk. She tied it to a small string and wore it in her hair, believing it brought quiet thoughts. But it wasn't just a feather. Soon, others began to find them, wedged between stones, caught in tree bark, floating in streams. They all looked the same, long, pale, soft, and silent. The elders said it was the sign of the silent messenger, an old spirit said to walk the world without voice, watching, learning, guiding. Children would leave small gifts where they found feathers, berries, smooth stones, carved beads. They whispered wishes into the wind, hoping the messenger would hear. No one ever saw it, but sometimes, in the early mist of dawn, footsteps appeared in places where no one had walked. One morning, near the edge of the forest, Ilan found a feather tied with woven grass, a sign, perhaps, or a reminder that even silence holds meaning. The people began to live more gently. They listened to the wind, noticed the hush between bird calls, the stillness before rain. Their fires burned lower at night. Their voices softened.
And with this quiet came something deeper, a feeling of being part of something older, larger, slower than words. That night, Mira lay by the fire, the feather still in her hair. She closed her eyes and listened to the silence. Not empty, but full, full of memory, of presence, of time breathing all around her. The silent messenger was near. And so sleep came, soft and deep, like the hush between stars. The fire crackled softly as Elon held the new copper blade in his hands, not for war, but for the wheat. Forged with care, cooled in the river, the blade shimmered under the moonlight. It wasn't sharp in the way of teeth or claws, but it held a song, a hum that only the smith could hear as he hammered, folded, and shaped the molten glow into something useful. They called it the copper song. The elders said that copper carried memory, that each tool remembered the hands that made it, the fire that shaped it, the soil it cut. When Elon used his blade to harvest tall stalks of grain, he moved slowly, as though in a dance, letting the tool teach him. And it did. The blade curved with time. It found the rhythm of the fields, the tempo of the land. The people noticed. Harvesting became smoother, easier, even beautiful. They no longer tore the earth. They touched it, sang with it, moved with it. The smiths began engraving symbols into each tool, simple spirals, river lines, sunbursts, not for decoration, but to speak. Each symbol told a story of the sun that warmed the forge, of the tree that shaded the worker, of the child who watched with wide eyes as sparks flew. Tools were not just tools. They were companions, memories cast in metal. That evening, Mira sat beside Elon, running her fingers over the blade's surface. It was cool now, resting. The fire danced quietly beside them, and the stars blinked, listening. In the stillness, they could almost hear it, the faint hum of the copper song, echoing through the night, gentle and steady. Sleep came with it, like a lullaby of fire and metal sung softly by the earth itself. Beyond the far ridge, where the hills folded like old cloth, there was a cave, hidden, quiet, and sacred. The people called it the Cave of Painted Dreams, not for what it held, but for how it felt. No one lived there, but all had visited. Inside, the walls were soft and cool to the touch, covered in layered colors, red ochre, black soot, yellow clay. Images of hands, deer, sunbursts, spirals, and figures dancing under the stars. Some were fresh, others fading into the stone like whispers. It wasn't a place of worship, it was something gentler, a place to remember. Children came with their parents, bringing small bowls of pigment. Elders dipped their fingers in paint, guiding tiny hands to leave their marks. No one spoke much inside the cave. The silence there was thick like water, deep, peaceful. Mira once asked an elder why they painted. He smiled, brushing his palm across an ancient spiral. "To show the stone we were here," he whispered, "and to listen if it replies." Each symbol carried a story, not in words, but in feeling. A hunt remembered, a loved one lost, a season returned. The walls weren't just painted, they were layered with dreams, memories, and time. At night,
By the fireside, the people told stories of the cave. They spoke of visions seen in the flicker of torchlight, of animals that blinked, shadows that moved, and whispers in the paint. Whether real or imagined didn't matter. The cave held their dreams. And so, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Mira dreamed too, of painted walls, of silent caves, of the earth remembering every soul who ever loved it. Sleep came like soft clay, wrapping her in warmth. The dreams had a home.
The winds shifted with a quiet rhythm, carrying with them the scents of distant grasses and the soft echoes of hooves. Word had spread among the village. The herds were returning. Not the tame ones in their wooden pens, but the great wild animals, the aurochs and red deer, following the ancient paths carved by generations. It was a time of silent celebration. Mira and her people prepared, not with spears or traps, but with gentle reverence. These creatures were not only food, they were companions in a story older than memory. Creatures that had walked beside humans long before copper, long before fire was tamed. At dawn, Mira climbed the lookout hill with her father. From there, the world looked endless. The tall grasses shimmered in silver waves, and just beyond them, the herd appeared, slow, graceful, powerful. The earth seemed to breathe with them. No one ran to hunt, not yet. The people waited, watching the animals move through the land, nibbling, pausing, listening. It was a dance, an agreement. The people would take only what was needed, nothing more. And in return, the herds would always return, year after year, season after season. That evening, around the fire, Mira asked her father, "How do they know to come back?" He smiled and tossed a twig into the flames. "Because we honor them, and they feel that." The stars overhead blinked gently in reply, as if listening. In the stillness, Mira felt the truth of it. The land, the people, the animals, all threads of the same quiet tapestry. As sleep crept in, the sound of distant hooves echoed in her dreams, steady, comforting, eternal. As summer deepened, the river by Mira's village shrank to a slow, shimmering ribbon. The waters no longer rushed with spring's wild laughter, but whispered ancient songs across smooth stones. Mira loved the river most in this quiet season. Each morning she walked barefoot along its edge, the pebbles warm beneath her feet. She would pause by the flat stones near the bend, where the water sang as it trickled and curled around tiny islands of moss. The elders said the stones could remember, that the river carried not just water, but time itself, wearing down rock, whispering to roots, shaping the land and those who lived beside it. One afternoon, Mira brought her little brother with her. He was just beginning to speak, his words soft and curious. She placed a smooth, flat stone into his hand. "This one," she told him gently, "saw the first fire we ever made, maybe even the first copper hammered into a tool." He looked at it with wide eyes, then placed it carefully into the water. The ripples spread slowly, then vanished. "Will it tell the river our story now?" he asked. Mira smiled. "Maybe it already has." The two sat quietly, listening to the soft gurgle of water over rock, the buzz of bees nearby, the gentle creak of trees swaying with the wind. It was the kind of silence that didn't need filling, only feeling. By dusk, the river glowed golden under the setting sun, and Mira carried her little brother back home, both of them sleepy and content. That night, in her dreams, Mira heard the stones singing, slow, low melodies that told stories older than words. And she knew the river would remember them too.
On a hill just beyond the village, where the grass grew long and the sky stretched wide, stood a tall wooden post carved with simple symbols. It was called the Watcher, and no one knew who first placed it there. It had stood since before Mira's grandmother was born, watching over the land in silence. Mira often climbed the hill when she needed to think. The wind always felt different up there, cooler, clearer, carrying the scent of far-off rains and distant forests. Some said it was the breath of the gods. Others thought it was the voice of the ancestors. Mira liked to think it was simply the world listening, and sometimes answering back. One evening, after helping mend baskets all day, she climbed the hill alone. The sky was painted with the colors of sleep, soft blues, deep purples, and the faint gold of the last light. She stood beside the Watcher, laying a hand on its rough surface. The symbols carved into the wood were worn smooth by time and weather, but their meaning still lingered in the air. Closing her eyes, she let the wind pass over her, lifting her hair and brushing against her face like a kind friend. Down below, the village glowed with firelight. The sounds of cooking, laughter, and quiet conversation floated upward, warm and familiar. The Watcher stood still, as it always had, and Mira whispered to it, "We're doing well. The crops are growing, the copper is strong, and the children are laughing." The wind stirred once more, then fell quiet. She stayed there until the stars appeared, blinking gently in the sky like ancient eyes. Then she turned and walked home, feeling a peace that only the hill and the Watcher could give.
In the quiet of early morning, before the birds began their song, a soft orange glow flickered through the trees. It came from the Ember Path, a winding trail lit by small clay lanterns leading from the village to the river shrine. The shrine was simple, a stone circle nestled beside a bend in the river where the water slowed and shimmered. It was where people came to offer thanks, to seek guidance, or simply to sit in silence. The path itself had become a symbol, a bridge between daily life and the deeper rhythms of nature. Tari, the oldest woman in the village, was the keeper of the embers. Each morning she would rise before the sun, light the lanterns one by one, and walk the path slowly, whispering blessings into the air. Today, her granddaughter Nara followed her for the first time. The morning mist clung gently to the ground, and dew sparkled on every leaf. Nara walked with careful steps, watching her grandmother's hands move with practiced ease, lighting each lantern, adjusting the small clay lids to keep the flames steady against the breeze. "Why do we light them, grandmother?" Nara asked softly. Tari smiled, not stopping her rhythm. "To remind the river we are still here, and to remind us that we are never walking alone." Nara thought about that as they reached the shrine. The river flowed beside them, calm and steady, its voice like a lullaby woven through stone and reed. They sat on the smooth stones, listening. The world was slow here and gentle, a place where copper tools rested, where fires slept, and where even the thoughts in one's mind softened like leaves floating on water. As the sun crested the hills, its golden rays met the fading light of the lanterns, and for a moment everything glowed. And then, peace. It had been many days since the last rainfall. The earth had begun to crack in quiet patterns, and the leaves of the fig trees curled in on themselves. The people of the village looked to the sky often, searching for signs in the movement of clouds, the direction of the wind, or the silence of the birds. But some listened differently. In the northern edge of the village lived two brothers, Sion and Emic, known as the rain listeners. They didn't speak much, nor did they follow the sky with their eyes. Instead, they listened to the earth, to the stillness, to the murmurs of change. Every evening, they would walk to a high rock where the wind passed clean and free. There they would sit with their palms open, eyes closed, breathing slowly. It was said that they could hear the rain before it came, not with ears, but with something deeper. One evening, Emic opened his eyes and smiled. "Soon," he whispered. That night, the village prepared. Clay pots were arranged beneath the eaves of houses. Children helped spread woven mats over drying seeds. The firewood was brought inside, and the copper tools were wrapped in hide. Then, in the middle of the night, it came. A single drop, then another, and soon the soft rhythm of rain dancing on the rooftops. No thunder, no wind, just a slow, steady gift from the sky. People stirred from their sleep, not in alarm, but in joy. They stood at their doorways, faces tilted upward, eyes closed like the rain listeners, and the earth drank. And the dreams that night were deep and cool, like the soil after a long thirst, full of softness and promise and rest. At the edge of the forest, beyond the fields where barley grew in golden sways, there was a boy named Irau, who carried with him a flute carved from the hollow bone of a wild deer. It was smooth to the touch, worn by his fingers in time, and the music it made was unlike anything the village had ever known. Irau did not speak often, but his music told stories of rivers and birds, of copper glowing in fire, of dreams that floated through the leaves like sunlight. Each evening, when the work of the day was done, the villagers would gather on woven mats near the central fire and wait. When Irau played, the children fell silent first, their eyes wide with wonder. Then the elders closed their eyes and leaned back, remembering the days when their own fingers had crafted things with care and wonder. The flute sound was soft and breathy, like wind through reeds. It did not shout or command. It invited. It beckoned hearts to quiet, to slow, to feel the pulse of the land and the warmth of being together. Sometimes the animals would come close, a fox at the edge of the trees, an owl blinking slowly on a branch above. They too seemed to listen. No one knew where Irau had learned to play, or if he had taught himself by listening to the world, but it didn't matter. The village began to sleep more peacefully, as if the flute's melodies had woven a kind of spell, not of magic, but of stillness. In that time, lullabies were not sung with words, but with wind and bone, and dreams came easier, like leaves drifting gently to rest on quiet water. As the seasons passed and the harvests came and went, the village began a quiet tradition. On the longest night of the year, when the stars gathered thick across the dark sky and the air was crisp with winter's breath, They built a wide circle of fire in the center of the clearing. Each family brought a small bundle of wood, tied with woven grass and scented with herbs. They placed them gently in the pile, speaking softly, not in ceremony, but in calm unity. When the fire was lit, it crackled to life slowly, warm and steady, casting amber light on every face. They sat in a wide ring, wrapped in furs and old blankets, watching the flames dance. No one spoke at first. There was no need. The fire did the talking. It hissed, it whispered, it shifted and flickered like memory itself. Old tales were passed around, like bowls of soup. Elders told of times when the rivers changed course and the people followed them, carrying fire and hope. Hunters spoke of the old bear that lived in the mountain, whom none dared challenge. Mothers hummed the tunes their mothers had hummed, as little ones dozed in their arms. Above them, the stars moved slowly, as if listening. Smoke rose in soft spirals, meeting the night without struggle. That night, time seemed to stretch gently. The past, present, and future sat together in the same circle, not as burdens, but as friends. Copper tools gleamed faintly in the firelight, not as weapons, but as symbols of care and craftsmanship. In the stillness, it was easy to forget fear. The world, for that moment, felt whole.
In the hush of early morning, before the first bird called, and while the fire's last embers still glowed red beneath a blanket of ash, the village rested. All around, the world seemed to hold its breath, not in fear, but in peace. Ilan stood at the edge of the forest path, where copper tools had first struck soil and stone seasons ago. He looked over the land, the fields they had tamed, the river that fed them, the hills that watched over them like gentle giants. He was no longer the child who feared thunder or the young man who ran after deer. Now he understood the rhythm of the world. The seasons whispered their secrets if you listened. The earth gave, and if treated kindly, it gave again. Behind him, his people slept in huts warmed by fire and story. Children dreamed of stars, mothers sighed softly in sleep, dogs stirred, then settled again. All was still. Ilan placed a smooth stone on the path, round, pale, and worn by time. Not a marker, not a monument, just a sign that someone had walked here with care. He turned back toward the village, walking slowly, each footstep sinking into the soft earth. The copper blade at his side swung gently with his movement, a quiet reminder of how far they had come. From sticks and stones to fire and metal, from caves to fields, from fear to understanding. As the sun rose behind the trees, casting long golden fingers across the land, the village stirred once more. Life would continue, in rhythm, in silence, in song. And in that ancient morning light, it seemed the world, too, was dreaming.
And now, as the embers of the past fade into the hush of night, we thank you for walking with us through the soft echoes of the Chalcolithic age. If this journey brought you a sense of calm, wonder, or sleepful ease, please leave a like. It tells us our stories are reaching hearts like yours. Subscribe for more quiet paths through history's forgotten ages. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts or dreams. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need a little peace tonight. Until next time, rest gently and dream of firelight, copper skies, and the silent wisdom of ancient days.